The year is 1590, and English Governor John White is finally sailing back to the colony he helped found on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. He had been away for 3 years, far longer than he ever intended. As his ship approached the shore, his crew fired a signal cannon and played familiar English tunes on a trumpet, hoping to draw the settlers out to meet them. No one came. When White stepped ashore, the settlement was completely empty. Not abandoned in a hurry, not burned to the ground. Simply gone. To understand what happened, we have to go back to the beginning, to a moment when England was hungry for a foothold in the New World. Spain had already claimed vast territories across the Americas, extracting enormous wealth and projecting power across the Atlantic. England, under Queen Elizabeth of Athens, had no permanent colony anywhere in the Americas and was falling dangerously behind. The man tasked with changing that was Sir Walter Raleigh, courtier, explorer, and one of the most ambitious men in Elizabethan England. In 1584, Raleigh dispatched an exploratory expedition to scout a suitable location for an English settlement along the eastern coast of North America. The scouts returned with 2 Native American men, Manteo and Juan Chese, and glowing reports of a place they called Roanoke. The first attempt to establish a presence at Roanoke came in 1585, when Raleigh sent a military expedition of roughly 107 men under the command of Ralph Lane. They built a small fort on the northern end of Roanoke Island and spent a year exploring the surrounding region. But the mission ran into serious trouble almost immediately. Relations with the local Algonquian-speaking peoples, particularly the Secotan and Croatoan tribes, deteriorated badly. Lane's men were often hungry, dependent on native food supplies, and growing increasingly desperate and violent in their demands. By the summer of 1586, the situation had collapsed entirely, and the colonists accepted a ride home on Francis Drake's passing fleet. Despite that failure, Raleigh was not finished. In 1587, he organized a second, very different kind of expedition. Not a military garrison this time, but a civilian settlement. Among the 117 colonists were entire families. Men, women, and children, all intending to build permanent lives in the New World. Their governor was John White, an artist and mapmaker who had sailed with the earlier expedition and knew the region firsthand. The plan was not to return to Roanoke at all. They were supposed to land further north at the Chesapeake Bay, a location considered more promising. Within weeks of landing, the colonists were already in serious difficulty. The small garrison left behind the previous year had vanished. Only bones were found, and the fort was overgrown. Relations with some neighboring tribes were hostile from the outset, a legacy of the violence and mistrust from the Lane expedition. One colonist, George Howe, was killed by native arrows while alone crabbing in a shallow creek, the first death of the new colony. The settlers appealed to their governor for help, and John White did what he could to establish diplomatic contact with friendly tribes, particularly the Croatoan people led by Manteo, who had twice sailed to England and remained an ally. But it was becoming clear that the colony needed urgent resupply from England. On August 18, 1587, a girl was born inside the Roanoke settlement. Her name was Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. She was John White's granddaughter. 9 days later, with the colony still desperately short of supplies, the colonists persuaded White to sail back to England himself to arrange a resupply mission. It was an agonizing decision for a grandfather who had just watched his grandchild born on foreign soil. White agreed, but he fully expected to return within months. What happened next would delay White's return, not by months, but by years. In 1588, as White was preparing to sail back to Roanoke, England faced an existential threat. The Spanish Armada, the largest naval force ever assembled, was bearing down on the English coast. Queen Elizabeth ordered that all available ships be pressed into national defense. White managed to secure 2 small vessels, but they were attacked by French privateers and forced to turn back before they ever crossed the Atlantic. He would not reach Roanoke again for 3 more years. The sequence of events that kept White away is important to see laid out. In 1587, the colony was founded and White sailed to England. In 1588, the Armada crisis blocked any attempt at resupply. In 1589, privateering interests and ongoing war with Spain kept ships occupied. And in 1590, White finally managed to secure passage, not on a dedicated resupply mission, but on a privateering voyage that agreed to stop at Roanoke on the way. 3 years had passed by the time he set foot on that island again. When White arrived at the site in August 1590, what he found, and what he did not find, shaped every theory that followed. The settlement's outer palisade was still standing, but all the buildings inside had been dismantled, not destroyed. The colonists' heavy equipment, including iron bars and farming tools, had been buried and were later uncovered. There were no graves, no human remains, no signs of a violent struggle. But on one of the main posts of the palisade, letters had been carved in clear capital letters, C-R-O-A-T-O-A-N. On a nearby tree, the letters C-R-O were carved, as if the message had been started and not finished. White was encouraged by the carving. Croatoan Island, present-day Hatteras Island, was roughly 50 miles to the south, and it was home to the Croatoan people, who had been consistent allies of the English. Manteo himself was Croatoan. White believed the colonists had simply moved there, as planned and as indicated. He immediately tried to sail south to Croatoan Island to find them, but the weather would not cooperate. White left behind written accounts of everything he observed, and those accounts remain among the most important primary sources we have. In one letter, he wrote of his return and what he found, and his words carry the weight of a man describing an event he could not fully comprehend. He wrote, "I greatly joyed that I had safely found a certain token of their safe being at Croatoan, which is the place where Manteo was born, and the savages of the island our friends." He remained hopeful even in the face of uncertainty. But hope, as it turned out, was all he had. The Croatoan theory, the idea that the colonists moved south and integrated with the Croatoan people, remains the most widely supported explanation among historians today. The carved message is strong evidence. The pre-agreed signaling system White described makes the carving almost certainly intentional. Archaeological work at Cape Creek on Hatteras Island, conducted by researchers including those from the Croatoan Archaeological Society and the University of Bristol, has uncovered 16th century European artifacts: a copper farthing, a slipware bowl fragment, iron tools. These finds suggest sustained European presence or contact at Croatoan territory during exactly the right period. But the evidence is tantalizing rather than conclusive. A second major theory holds that the colonists did not move south to Croatoan territory, but north to the Chesapeake Bay region, which had been their original intended destination. This theory gained significant traction from a 1608 report by John Smith, the leader of the Jamestown colony, who was told by the Powhatan chief that his people had killed a group of English settlers living peacefully with a tribe near the Chesapeake. The timing would fit. If a group of Roanoke colonists had made their way north to Chesapeake territory and lived among local tribes for over a decade, they could have been among those killed when Powhatan consolidated his power around 1607. However, this account was filtered through multiple layers of translation and political context. Powhatan had reasons to claim strength and authority, and historians treat it with significant caution. It is a compelling lead, but it is not confirmed evidence. The two main theories, Croatoan and Chesapeake, are not mutually exclusive. One plausible reconstruction is that the colony split into at least two groups, some moving south to Roanoke Island, others attempting the longer northward journey to Chesapeake Bay. This would explain why the artifact evidence points south, while the Powhatan testimony points north. The colonists had been on the island for 3 years without resupply, long enough to reach very different conclusions about the best course of survival. A divided colony, each group choosing a different refuge, is entirely consistent with the evidence as it stands. There are other theories, less supported but still circulating. Some researchers have proposed the colonists attempted to sail back to England themselves on a small vessel called the Pinnace, which was known to be at the colony, and were lost at sea. Others have pointed to conflict with hostile tribes beyond the Croatoan, particularly the Secotan, who had already shown violent intent. A small but vocal body of researchers has long promoted the idea of full assimilation, that the colonists were absorbed so completely into native society that they simply ceased to exist as a distinct English group, their descendants intermarrying over generations. In the early 20th century, anthropologist James Mooney and others noted that the Lumbee people of North Carolina had family names matching those of Roanoke colonists. Surnames like Berry, Cooper, and others appear in historical records of both groups. The Lumbee themselves have a long oral tradition connecting their ancestry to the lost colonists. Modern archaeology has made some of the most intriguing recent contributions to the mystery. In 2012, researchers examining a 1585 map drawn by John White himself, a map held at the British Museum, discovered something hidden beneath a patch that had been glued over the original drawing. Under infrared and multispectral imaging, the patch revealed a small symbol, a 4-pointed star, apparently marking a site inland, west of Roanoke, in the area now known as the North Carolina Piedmont. The First Colony Foundation and the British Museum confirmed the find was genuine and not a later addition. Some researchers interpreted the symbol as a possible inland refuge site, a location the colonists may have prepared in advance as a fallback position. Excavations in the Piedmont region, particularly at a site near Merry Hill, have found 16th century European artifacts consistent with this hypothesis. What makes the Roanoke mystery so enduring is not just the absence of answers. It is the quality of the questions it raises. This was not a tiny military outpost, but a community of human beings with names, families, and intentions. We know John White's granddaughter Virginia Dare was among them. We do not know if she lived to adulthood, or for how long, or what became of her. We do not know whether the colony's fate was violent or peaceful, gradual or sudden. We do not know if the people of Roanoke were absorbed into a native community, died trying to reach safety, were lost at sea, or some combination of all three. The lost colony of Roanoke has been called the first great American mystery, and after 4 centuries, that title still holds. Archaeology is ongoing. New imaging technologies are still being applied to historical documents. The Piedmont sites are still being excavated. It is possible, not certain, but possible, that a definitive answer will eventually emerge. Until then, the Croatoan carving remains what it has always been. A message from people who knew they were leaving, who wanted to be found, and who have not been found yet. If you found this mystery as compelling as we did, subscribe for more stories from history's unanswered questions.